Okay, my friends. Anybody still working? All right, well, let's look at this quiz. Questions about truth. This is pretty mind-bending stuff, but we want to try to, hopefully we can make it simple. Number one, the claim that truth is relative is an absolute claim which falsifies the relativist's position. That is true. So if truth is relative to your perspective, then everybody has their truth from their point of view. And if you're standing over here, you see the room a little different than if you're standing over here. But the absolute truth is that one person was over here and one person was over here, right? That's the objective truth. And we see that in reality. We stop at stoplights. We trust our senses. And so that we see that things really are what they are. We can't change that, right? We can't make A equal B. A is always A, B is always B. So the statement here that truth is relative is an absolute statement. All truth is relative. All truth is from a certain perspective. But the problem with that is that that statement is not necessarily relative. It's absolute. It's saying this is true at all times for all people. It's universal truth, that all truth is relative. But if you say that it's universal truth, that all truth is relative, you've excluded the statement that you've just made. Is anybody with me? I'm sorry. I know it's difficult. But once you get it, it kind of clicks. Absolute truth is always true. You guys were on this side and you guys were on this side. But you saw different perspectives of what's up here. And that's true. So the truth is not, your truth is that I only have this part of my body, and your truth is, but the claim itself is absolute, that all truth is relative. Anybody getting it? Yes. I don't want to belabor it, but this is kind of important because it's so common. Somebody might say, God exists for you, and that's fine for you, but it's not for me. And then they just leave it there. But if truth is absolute, in other words, it's always the same, then either God exists or he doesn't. And we have to sort that out. Okay. So what leads from this is that morals are relative. What was good for you in a certain time was different than what's good for me now. And so you have no standard of right and wrong. It's all subjective, perspectival. In other words, from your point of view, you were trying to do your best. But what we need is a standard of what's right and wrong for everybody, no matter what your situation is. So that what that relative truth leads to is there's no real right and wrong because it's based on what you think at the time. What your little tiny perspective says is good for you. So, people could argue that it was good for me to murder this guy because he was threatening me or whatever. But we know thou shalt not kill is the standard. Any questions about that? Comments? Okay, we've talked about that. I just didn't want to leave it if it was fuzzy. Number two, according to Geisler, truth is what corresponds to reality. So that's, in a sense, that's the absolute truth, whatever is real. And we do have perspectives, don't we? We're caught in the space-time continuum. We can only see things from our perspective. But who can see everything objectively? God, right. God sees everything as it is. So that's why one reason we can trust him. His knowledge is full. There's no limitations to his knowledge. So in a sense, if there is absolute truth, there must be an absolute mind that sees everything as it is. And in Christianity, we have that, and we have that he's revealed himself to us. And if we take that next step with the morals, he's revealed what's right and wrong. And so what is the right and wrong standard that God's given us? What's that based on? Yeah, did you say himself? His own character. He is good. He is holy. He's righteous. He is love. That's what the Bible tells us. So if somebody asks the question, well, could God have just randomly made a different standard? The answer to that is not really, according to the Bible, because of his character. He is, in his essence, good. Like John said, God is love. All right, so the correspondence theory of truth, that which is real. 3, Scripture does not use the correspondence view of truth. All right, that's false. And he's mainly contrasting this with this coherent theory. But Scripture is based on reality. It's not based on just a good argument with premises that can't be necessarily proven. He notes Exodus 20:16, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. So in this correspondence view, there's what's real, what's actually happened, and then there's somebody lying about you, slandering you, bearing false witness. We know because of just our little experience that we've had in the world, that people can say something untrue about you because you know the reality is that didn't happen. And that's very hurtful, right? Have you had people do that to you? Slander you and say things that... So that presupposes this correspondence view of truth. That something is real, the other thing is false, and it's very simple in that sense. The coherent theory of truth does not work very well in the case of Mack trucks. He mentions this in this coherence theory, which is the argument might be impressive, that it's tight and it links together, and you have a conclusion like a syllogism, but it also may be based on false premises. And just because the argument sounds good doesn't mean it's anchored in reality. He says, statements that inform you of something must correspond to the facts, to reality, about which they claim to be giving information. But if those facts are not to be used in evaluating the statement, then I really haven't told you anything. I have merely babbled something that you ought to consider and weigh its relevance to your own system of thought. Now, this could be quite dangerous if you were crossing the street and my statement was to inform you that a Mack truck was coming. How long should you take to see if that fits into your overall network of beliefs? And he says, and does not the gospel carry the same kind of urgency? Correspondence to reality is a philosophical prerequisite for truth and truthful communication. Okay. So number 4 is true. 5, when we read the Bible, we can only understand the author's intended meaning when we think about his psychological state when he wrote. Okay, good. Meaning, he says, is a disclosure of the author's intentions, but it can only be discovered by looking at what the author actually said. So this is kind of a hermeneutical principle. Since we cannot read the author's mind, when we want to know the meaning of a statement, we look at the statement itself. So it's pretty simple. So that's number 5 is false. We look at the Bible and we see the words, and that's what the intended meaning is. And we try to interpret that. Number 6, if you know that you don't know anything, then at least you know that much. So this has to do with skepticism, agnosticism. David Hume, he mentions here doubts that you can have absolute knowledge because it's, he says everything is conditioned by our perspective. Like have you ever taken a stick and put it in like water, and it has this optical illusion effect? Have you ever seen that? Where it's like the stick and you put it in, it looks like it's going a different way. So David Hume takes those sorts of things, and he's skeptical that we can really have solid knowledge. But the fact is, the objective fact is, that when you put the stick in the water, there's an optical illusion. That's okay, right? It doesn't mean I can't know. It just means certain properties produce certain things, like the water. So, we are built from the Christian worldview point of view to receive knowledge, to understand. God has revealed himself. He has spoken. And we have the capacity to receive it, know it, trust it. So we don't have to just give up on it like Pilate did. What is truth? Nobody really knows. We can't because we're so limited. He says, likewise, you may say that you should doubt everything, but you don't doubt that you should doubt everything. There's always that you have to deal with reality, and you have to see if the statement holds up. Yes?
Oh, no, I wasn't raising my hand.
Oh, okay. So he says, if there is one thing that you can be certain of, the skeptic, or one thing that you can know for sure, the agnostic, then there might be other things, and your position has proven itself false. And that's what we have. In the end, these are self-refuting.
I'm going to need your help afterwards to recap these because I'm super lost in where we are.
Yeah, it's difficult. And a lot of these things are self-defeating. For instance, the skeptic, you should doubt everything, is skepticism. But what if I doubted his statement that you should doubt everything? You see what I'm saying?
By grading this, I'm ready to help.
What's that?
I need help grading this afterwards because I'm super lost in both left and wrong.
Yeah, we'll go over it and review it. All right. So number 6 is true. If you don't know anything, at least you know that much that you don't know anything, thus the statement is self-refuting. All right, number 7, according to Geisler, rationalism is merely a view that says we use reason to test truth. That's false. Rationalism is this idea that we can find truth through pure reasoning, not just test it. So rationalism is somewhat like this correspondence or the coherence view, in that everything can make sense based on premises, but it still might not be grounded in reality. It's good logic, but the premise could be wrong. So it's just a tool. So number 7 is false. Rationalism is to test truth. Does it make sense? It can't, in the end, give us truth all by itself. All right, number 8, the main problem with fideism is that it doesn't recognize the difference between belief in and belief that. All right, that's true. So it's sort of a I believe it because I believe it sort of a thing. And he says, evidence and logical proofs can assist us toward belief that God exists. The Bible is His Word, so on. But they cannot make us commit our lives to those truths. So there's evidence, and those are good reasons to believe. Instead of just, I believe it because I want to believe it, which is fideism. Number 9, Geisler says that a self-evident principle is one that cannot be denied without assuming that it is true in the process of the denial. That's true. So that's, in a sense, that's like the claim that truth is relative. It's self-refuting, because it's stated as an absolute, even though it's saying everything is relative. 10, all logic can be reduced to one single axiom, the law of non-contradiction. No two opposite statements can both be true in the same time in the same sense. That's true. So, this phone cannot be identified with this book. There are two different things. That's the law of non-contradiction. And to just think that truth is perspectival, somebody who thinks this book is a phone, it's just not grounded in reality. So it's really simple. It's really something that we have instinctually, or we operate with it all the time, that truth is absolute. It corresponds with reality. All these other options fail. That's the main point of this chapter. Okay, so let's look at this. Number 1 and 2 are true. 3 is false. 4 is true. 5 is false. 6 is true. 7 false. 8, 9, 10 are true. So you can mark your papers and pass them forward. Okay, is that everybody? So let's think about here, what does the Bible say about truth? Because the Bible is our trustworthy authority. There's all kinds of other authorities that we could appeal to. And this is a personal commitment, isn't it? This is personal trust. Because There's all kinds, as he said in the book, there's evidence that God exists. The Bible itself says this, Romans 19, Psalm 19, Romans 1, all of that we've talked about. So that there's evidence that corresponds with reality. It really happened. I don't just believe it because I feel something or because I want to believe it. I hope and wish it's true. But there's evidence that is grounded in reality so that I can commit myself and trust it. For instance, if you were on a long hike and there was a big chasm, say, and you had to get across it, one of you guys or your trail guide jumped across the chasm. It's not that it's that big, and then reached over and said, just take my hand and I'll help you across. On what basis would you trust him? Come again?
Just because he's paid to be there doesn't mean you'll get there safely. Well, if he wants to keep getting money, he's going to get people safely across.
He's the trail guide. Maybe you've already known him, and you know that he knows what he's doing. In other words, it's based on evidence that you've already seen. Like you said, he just leaped across it. He's got some physical abilities. You can trust that. He's big and strong. You can just look at him and see that. So you choose to trust yourself to things, but it's not just an empty hope and wish. It's based on evidence. And evidence is rooted in reality. That's what we do all the time. And that's what we operate with. Even though the culture has these other things, your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. None of that really makes sense in how we operate and what we decide to really trust. So based on that, that's the view of the Bible. And it's a simple view. It's a view that any little child understands instinctively, in a sense. So what does the Bible say about the value of truth? Buy the truth and do not sell it. So you could have a fantasy and really want to believe that if I jump off this building, I'm going to fly, right? And you could even have a syllogistic argument that's tight, based on some premise. But we know by experience that gravity is something that's always real. So you're going to fall and you're going to hit the ground. So truth being real is so valuable. We want to line our lives up with what's real and what's right and what's true in that sense. And that's what the Bible says that it offers. For instance, a lot of people, have you ever asked somebody, what's going to happen when you die? You know, you're trying to talk to them about the gospel or whatever. Because death is kind of everybody knows it's real. What if they were to say to you, well, I'm not going to die? You know, that's just, it doesn't work. But a lot of people will say things that are similar that don't work. Well, what happens is I just go to the dust and that's it, because I'm just an animal. So that's cohesive. I'm just an animal, therefore when I die, nothing else happens. You see that? That holds together if you believe you're just an animal. But what's the evidence in reality? When we think about the things that pertain to human beings, is the reality line up with the fact that we have as Ecclesiastes says, eternity in our hearts. That we see the value that's not just like an animal in other people. That we can relate to them as persons, their thoughts. There's love that seems to be beyond just animal sorts of things. There's a lot of evidence that shows, in other words, people can believe things, but they don't correspond to reality. And they can even argue for them. But we have to really look at the evidence. And of course, the Bible tells us itself that God reveals the truth to us. So it's very valuable. It's valuable to the person who thinks they're just going to turn to dust, and then they have to face the judgment at the end. That's a problem. They were wrong. So that's, truth as it corresponds to reality is you can really be wrong. Jesus illustrated this with the narrow gate and the narrow path and the broad path. Many go by it, and they think they're right about it, but they're completely on the wrong path. Utterly, completely. Buy the truth and do not sell it. So, the Bible assumes that truth exists, that there's things that are actual and there are things that are false. It also assumes truth can be known. It's not this, we can't really know anything, like Pontius Pilate. What is truth? Nobody knows what it is, but it can be known. God is communicating through the Bible, through sending His Son, through preachers that preach the Bible. Okay, and truth is priceless. It's the most valuable thing. All the way through Proverbs, we got that thing, that idea. Seek the truth. It's the most valuable. It's more valuable, wisdom and truth, than great riches. Okay. Interestingly, the Bible tells us the truth of the Lord endures forever. So, truth has its origin in God Himself, who is, as Jesus said, I am the truth. And God is never wrong. He's not a man that He should lie. All of those things we find in the Bible. And so, the nature of absolute truth is it's always true in all times for all people. And that's what we find in the Bible. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. My words will stay true for all time. So, therefore, that corresponds with the fact that I can trust God. How many times have you thought something was going on when it really wasn't going on? A lot, right? That's why we need that truth that's absolute, that we can guide, like the North Star, we can orient our lives by that truth, not what I think. I remember being in junior high, and you may have had a similar experience, and you're walking along, and you're a real goober like I was, and some people that you're walking past laugh real big. Ah, ha, ha, ha. And because we're so, sensitive to ourselves, what would a junior high kid think in that situation?
They're laughing at you.
Yeah, but would that be true? They might not have even seen you. They might be laughing at you, but you have to see if that's true or not. So we have all sorts of ideas that could be not true about yourself, about your own capabilities, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth of God is that which we can trust as being real and true. So the Lord is the source of truth. It comes from Him, His character, His objective view of everything. He knows everything. He made everything. Of course He knows it if He made it. The Lord's truth is eternally durable. It's something that will always be true. People aren't like that, are they? Somebody might tell you, hey, I'll spend this certain amount of time with you, and then later on they say, well, I can't because I got to work or whatever. But when Jesus says, I'll never leave you or forsake you, that never changes. It doesn't depend on His schedule or anything else. And we can count on it. Okay, here's a defense for absolute truth in the form of an argument. All truth exists in the mind of the supreme God. In other words, it's not just that it's not real and it's just in His mind. In other words, it's from His perspective, everything is objective. He sees it as it is. He sees you as you are. We don't even have a good idea about ourselves, do we? As far as being objective, are you objective about yourself? No, in your limited way, human nature is, as I mentioned before, is to judge myself based on my own standards or whatever, instead of trusting God that He's made me as I am, and that's what He decided to do. And that's it. I tell you, that's a real freedom, is not to compare yourself with other people. And just be who you are. It's okay. God made you like you are. And see what He has in mind for you. Also, it's freedom to not worry too much about what people think about you. Because what people think about you could even be wrong, couldn't it? What you think about yourself could be wrong. So to trust in the facts on the ground, God made you. It was His choice that you be here. And thus, I can stand on that solid fact. But again, as I've said, a lot of times we evaluate and judge ourselves based on what other people think, what we think, and we go through life with those burdens. And by the way, you can't always be happy, right? Have you noticed this? Except for Nathan. He's always happy. Nathan and my wife, they're always happy. Anyway, most of us, yeah, they're always happy. But you can't always be happy, but you can always be glad. For instance, I'm glad that in this part of Alaska there are no polar bears. You know what I'm saying? Because in other parts and other places where there are polar bears, people can walk outside and there's a polar bear, and that's the end of their life. It's a very dangerous thing. I can be glad about a lot of stuff. I'm glad that I got this old and I can still walk around and function as a human being, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever, health problems I might have, I'm still functioning. And what this leads us to is what will lead to this state of feeling better or happy as we think about it, and that is to be thankful. You can be thankful, and that'll change your whole perspective and leads to a more positive outlook. That's one of the keys to Christianity is thankfulness. Just be thankful. Because our thoughts, unlike God, who's objective, God sees, look, I've given you existence. You could have not ever even been, and here you are. Which means you have the capacity to know me and enter into joy forever. I've given you that. In addition to that, I've given you everything. You have eyes, you can see to whatever extent, all kinds of things. You have friends, you have all of the things in this life. All of those are from God. James says every good gift and every perfect present comes down from the Father of lights, in whom there's no shadow of turning. So if you ever get kind of down and you'd like to have a different perspective, enter into more peaceful. Just start thanking God for stuff. Thank you, God, for my water bottle. And just keep going. Because it's never ending. The things that God's given us. That's God's perspective. And so it's appropriate for us to praise and thank Him. Enter into His courts with thanksgiving. So that lines our minds up more with the reality, which is God is just blessing us like with a fire hose of blessing all the time. If we'll just acknowledge it, then we begin to move over into truth and reality. The fantasy is that nothing's good, and because I'm judging, I should be like that guy, or those are false. So God sees everything as it is. He sees you as a precious individual that He loves. Not as a failure, not as somebody who can't get it together. That's not what God sees. And He's patient with us. That's another thing to thank God for. Thank you, Lord, that you're patient with me, that you can help me. So, the objective truth is God the way God sees. And the supreme God is unchanging by nature. He doesn't have one thought one day and one the other, because it's all real and true. It doesn't change. His perspective, even His essence, who He is in His character and His being doesn't change. And we see that all through the Bible. It tells us that. All truth, therefore, is unchanging by nature, because it's God's perspective. That's what we need desperately, is God's perspective, so that we can orient our life by the truth and trust Him. Because it's propositional, but it's also personal. God's perspective is the truth as it is, but it's also, I love you, and I want to draw you up into the relationship, into a relationship with me as God, and that never changes. I'll never leave you or forsake you. God's love is not cold and hot. It's always there. So you can see how simple this is, but it relies on the reality of God Himself. Okay, this is an extended view definition, so let's just go through this. We won't belabor it too much. But this is a good book. I don't know if it's still available, but A Handbook of Christian Philosophy by Russ Bush. He was one of my teachers. Truth is that which corresponds with reality as it is. Truth is the opposite of falsehood. It's very simple. Things that we know innately. If I went to my little 4-year-old grandson and Charlie, and asked him, is it true that you can turn into a moose at night? I think he could sort that out, right? I mean, if he wanted to just be funny, he would say yes, but he knows it's not true.
What if it happens while he's sleeping and he doesn't?
Right, that's true. Sometimes you can ask little kids a question is kind of funny. They'll always say, no. If you ask them, did you slumber in your sleep? Ask them with that tone like, no, I didn't slumber in my sleep. Anyway. But all they need to know is the truth that the word slumber means to sleep. And they would say yes. Okay, truth is variously defined depending on one's epistemology, which is study of knowledge, and ontology, study of being. In the Bible, truth is related to God, as we've seen already. All truth is God's truth. Anything that's real and true is something that God already knows and sees. Therefore, truth is absolute, unchanging, and universal because God is. At the same time, truth is intensely personal, as I've been saying. One cannot separate what God says propositionally from who God is personally. Therefore, Jesus came and said, I am the truth. What a statement. So in that statement, he's claiming to be God. But it's personal. It's offering himself. I am the truth, and you can know me. So it's relational in that sense. In a similar way, man as a whole person is involved with truth. We can't really get away from it even if we try. People try all sorts of, I'm just an animal and so forth. But is that true? Are you just an animal? How would you even know if you were just an animal that you're just an animal? There's all kinds of problems with it. So we need to know what is right, what is true. We are made in the image of God, according to the Bible, not just an animal. The whole person is involved. Truth relates to the human's reason, values, experience. So truth and that solid reality of truth encompasses also ethics and values and morals, experiences, activities. Truth relates to the universal laws of logic and to public evidence, things that can be demonstrated. If I said to somebody, I saw a moose in Alaska, and they said, well, I don't believe you, I would just show them a picture. That's the picture I took right there. Public evidence. What's that? They could, and you could go on and on and on and on with the skeptic, and they're never going to believe you. But at some point, you have to end that because you can't go on seeing through everything, like the quote in that C.S. Lewis gave in the chapter, because then basically what you end up with is nothing. All right, perhaps the most significant aspect of the biblical view that truth is grounded in God is that since God is one, truth is a unity. He sees everything as it is. Distinctions between sacred and secular are challenged by the biblical view of truth also. All right, so that's that. I find that a helpful extended definition. So we have competing sources of truth about everything and about God. And here are some possibilities. Rationalism, which Geisler mentioned. I might arrive at the truth about God through an orderly process of deductive reasoning so as to know him with mathematical or logical certainty. And we are given reason, aren't we? We can logic things out. We can logic the fact that, hey, this guy who's been our trail guide, I can see he's got muscles. He's going to help me across this thing. There's nothing unreasonable about that. It's based on what you can see, what you can reason. So reason is important. Empiricism. I might arrive at the truth about God through my physical senses, by an orderly process of inductive reasoning, by the gathering and interpretation of evidence or facts in nature and history. So often these two things work together, reason and observation. So it's reasonable based on the observation to not go too close to the moose because he's big. I've seen videos where they kick things and knock them out, etc. Both of those things, I can see him now. I'm observing him. He's a giant animal, so I'm not going to go too close. I don't know what the dog thinks. The dog got pretty close to him this morning. Ran up, but he didn't get close enough to be kicked. Huh? Yeah, I wouldn't have seen the moose unless he had run over there and was right there by my cabin. So we have these ways. They're useful, but they can't really lead us to real truth. Experientialism. I might arrive at the truth about God by study and synthesis of my own heartfelt religious intuition and experience together with similar religious experiences that I know to exist in other persons. So that's real, isn't it? You have an experience of praying to God and he answers your prayer. That's another thing to thank him for. I've noticed that for me, I'm so dull-witted sometimes. I pray for something and he answers it and then I forget about it, you know. That's a good reason to have a prayer journal, you know. You can go back and see, look at all these things God's done to answer. Big things, little things. And that's part of your experience. But it can't be complete. Like, it can't really lead you. You can't trust it in the way you can trust God. Pragmatism. I might arrive at the truth about God in consideration of what works in a practical sense. Religion is to be judged by its result. So if it works, hey, it practically works, then it must be real. Or special revelation. I might arrive at the truth about God by examining that which God has specially and explicitly revealed concerning himself. And see how this is what's true, but he's also revealing himself. It's personal. And this is what Christians do. They thank God that he revealed his truth to us. Instead of wandering in the dark, even though these things God's given us, experience and observation and logic, we would never really know the ultimate truth without him, without his revelation. Every rational argument begins with a premise to which the proponent is already committed, and that's the coherence view of truth. It's that rational sense that explains things from a premise and other premises and makes a conclusion. But the premises could be wrong. They could be unreal. What was that?
Sound like a bark.
Really want that. Empiricism, bare facts must be interpreted. Meaning is assigned to facts in a given context and according to one's perspective. So empiricism is observation like science. Science is empiricism. It's looking at what's out there, but it has to be interpreted. In other words, like we were talking about this morning at breakfast, people will find a skull, but they interpret it within their framework of evolution. This must be one of the missing links of man. It turned out to be a pig. So, but their whole framework was false, even though they're observing it, but they're interpreting it in a false way because they're already, as in rationalism, they're already committed to evolution. Experientialism, what's the evaluation? This is so subjective and unworkable in the details because it's based on my own impressions, my own experience. which could certainly be wrong, as we've seen. I could certainly be wrong that the people are laughing at me, et cetera, et cetera. But that's my experience. This promotes a view of God as we would like him to be, not as he is. All right, what works in the pragmatism, the practical view of things, isn't necessarily what is true. Truth is more than just expedience. What is expedient? What seems to work practically? Long-range consequences are not known. And then, special revelation. This is what the Bible claims to be. The Bible tells us that Jesus is the ultimate revelation of God. Jesus himself said that. I've come to show you the Father. So that's the basis of truth, which we can understand through our reason. We can look at objectively what's the content of the Bible. We can experience what it says to us when we pray and when God works in our lives. And we can see that it works. Wisdom of God helps us to live in a way that has good consequences. Anyway, so those are some ways of truth that we can see contrasted with Revelation, the Bible. C.S. Lewis says that basically, see the title, there's no truth or meaning without God. He realized that as an atheist. He said, supposing there was no intelligence behind the universe, no creative mind. In that case, nobody designed my brain for the purpose of thinking. It is merely that when the atoms inside my skull happen for physical or chemical reasons to arrange themselves in a certain way, that this gives me as a byproduct the sensation I call thought. And this would be the secular, evolutionary, atheistic worldview. You don't have any other choice. Your thoughts are just mechanical. It's just by chance. Everything came by chance unless your thoughts are product of chance. How can you trust them? Is what he's saying. It's like upsetting a milk jug and hoping that the way it splashes itself will give you a map of London. But if I can't trust my own thinking, of course I can't trust the arguments leading to atheism, and therefore have no reason to be an atheist or anything else. This is his conclusion that he came to. Unless I believe in God, I cannot believe in thought, so I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. So that shows you he's exposing the absurdity and the emptiness of atheism there. Because we can know the truth because God is the truth. And he designed our minds to understand and to reason, etc., so that he can communicate with us. He also said atheism turns out to be too simple. If the whole universe has no meaning, we should never have found out that it has no meaning, because we wouldn't even be thinking in those terms. Go ahead.
If according to an atheist, thought is just a chemical reaction, how can they hold anybody accountable to anything, including believing that there's a God? Why do they bother arguing with somebody?
All right, exactly. But they still do. So
There's no meaning behind you think there's a God and I don't.
right.
Then why does it matter?
It may be that they've never considered this question. They just assume that their thoughts have some sort of meaning, even though they're trying to tell you nothing has any meaning. That's exactly right. So there's meaning and there's truth because there's God. Thank goodness. There's another form of this. If minds are wholly dependent on brains, and brains on biochemistry, and biochemistry on the meaningless flux of the atoms, I cannot understand how the thought of those minds should have any more significance than the sound of the wind. Okay, so without truth, we pretty much have nothing. And we can claim all sorts of things. God's not real. We can claim all that. But it ends up being an absurdity in a sense. So unless there's a God that made our minds, we can't trust our thoughts. But thank goodness there is, and we can commune with Him. All right, remember, when doing apologetics for evangelism, we can speak the truth in love. So there's that. Speaking the truth, exposing some of these things that are false, obviously. 1 Corinthians says, though I speak the truth but have not love, I'm an annoying sound. So sometimes when we tell the gospel, it's just a canned presentation. We need to engage and see the person as valuable, love them, as Peter said, treat them with gentleness and respect. Though I'm gifted and wise, but have not love, I'm nothing. Though I'm a giver and a martyr, but have not love, it is not profitable. So we can see how important love is. And speaking the truth in love. And God is love. That's one of the truths that we believe. And He wants us to love one another and love in general. So we have these characteristics of love. It's long-suffering, patient, kind, not parading, it's not puffed up. From 1 Corinthians 13, it's not rude, not self-seeking, is not easily provoked, doesn't think evil, not a rejoicer in sin. But a lot of the world is the opposite of this. We can see that in people. So we're reminded not to argue with people and so forth, but to take God's perspective on them, which is love. Aha! Here it all comes together. Verse 6, but love rejoices in truth. Rejoices in what's right, what's real, in God Himself, who is the truth. That's it. Okay, questions, comments on this? Okay, I want to show you just another little thing here. So we can say that truth is true. It's absolute. It's always true. And it exposes deception and the lies of Satan and the world. So it's possible to know the truth that corresponds with reality. And the most real thing is God Himself. He's more real than we are. All of this physical nature came from Him. So we can know this. We can understand it. We can know that objective truth about our world, which transcends the objective truth, which transcends subjective, merely personal perspectives. That's what helps us. That's what builds our character. Because that one step from my subjective, everything is about me, to everything is actually about God, that's a huge step, isn't it? Helps me to form my life based on reality, because a lot of us, it's easy as a human being to live based on the idea that everything's about me. So it's like being sort of loony, human nature, and going to sanity. Everything's about God, and now I can figure out how I fit into that reality, not just merely my personal perspective. Okay, apologetics primarily defends the assertions that, and this is Christian apologetics, There is an all-knowing God. That's what omniscience is. He knows everything. You can see the word science in there. Omni means all. So he has all knowledge. Who can have a son. That's what the Bible claims. And who can speak a word to us. He can reveal the truth to us. And thus, those are key foundations to a Christian worldview. So God has revealed himself and his truth to us. His Son claimed to be the truth himself, revealed. I've come to show you the Father. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Okay, truth is true. But there's a crisis of truth in North America, our culture. And this crisis has three faces. We can sort of sum it up. Liars. Are there lots of lies going on? No? That's not it. Can you think of one? What's a lie that's in our culture that you can think of?
I never lie.
Okay. That's a good one. Well, I've mentioned one. We're just animals. You know, people believe that. We're not that far from monkeys based on their coherent truth based on evolution that they think is true, but it's not. Hannah Arendt, a German historian and philosopher, commenting on World War II and Hitler and all of these things, says this constant lying is not aimed at making the people believe a lie, but at ensuring that no one believes anything anymore. So if you have all these different people claiming to be an authority, and they're contradictory, and they're not grounded in reality, pretty soon you get pretty confused. Does that sound like our culture? Yeah, and human beings. People that no longer distinguish between truth and lies cannot distinguish between right and wrong. So there's that connection, truth and morality. Such a people deprived of the power to think and judge is, without knowing and willing it, completely subjected to the rule of lies. With such a people, you can do whatever you want. So that's the rise of all these ideological dictators, shows that she's right. They're always lying to the people. So I thought that was an interesting little comment on it. So we have liars and then skeptics, people who doubt. That's their main job, is to doubt things. And then postmoderns who say, and this whole idea of relative truth and everything's subjective and perspectival from a certain point of view. And all of it is legitimate. So we have this, we're forced upon us, if some big burly guy puts a wig on and says he's a woman, we have to treat him that way, right? This is postmodernism, because that's his belief. But we can see the facts on the ground are that he's a man. This is the looniness of postmodernism. This is part of our culture. Postmoderns occupy a fantasy world where everything and nothing is true at the same time. It's relative. So it's both true that he's a big burly man that's born a male, and that he's a woman, and those are contradictory, but we have to accept both. So what we're talking about is insanity in one sense, especially from a Christian worldview. Okay. Here's what people believe. This is pretty interesting. Going into the 21st century, these are the trends. This is a little bit older, but it's still pertinent in the sense that this is the build-up to where we are now. A Bridger generation, 86% claimed to be Christian. But 90% affirms situation ethics. In other words, whatever is good for you in the moment, in your situation, that's okay. There's no standard rule. 90%. So all of those 80% that claim to be Christian should have said, no, there's absolute truth about morality, the 10 Commandments, and everything else from the Bible. But they affirm this idea that it depends on the situation. 80% say there's no certainty about morality, which those kind of go together. We can't really know. And it depends on your perspective. That's a huge number. This is what we've been taught. 72% agree with Pilate. We can never really define truth. So this is where people are, wandering around out there with no objective confidence in anything. 60% said that lying is necessary. So just admitting that there's lies shows that there's truth, which means you can know what's true. Though it's inconsistent in that sense. 66% affirm salvation by works. So that's the drift of human nature, is to think that we have to earn our salvation. 50% thinks Jesus sinned. So a big portion of those people that claim they were Christians have very little biblical knowledge, because it says that he sympathizes in all things as we, because he's been tempted yet without sin.
What would the sin be?
Well, anything, just, what's that? I don't know about that. He was a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief, and we esteemed him not.
I mean, they could accuse him of polygamy and marrying his whole church. If we're trying to come up with sin.
That was a weird thing to say. All right, maybe he got angry at the temple and that was too much or something. But the Bible tells us that he was the perfect Lamb of God. John the Baptist saw him walking. He said, behold, the Lamb of God, the Lamb of God, the perfect Lamb who takes away the sin of the world. 50% said that all religions teach similar lessons. We talked about that on Monday, that really doesn't work, and yet that's what they think. All good people go to heaven, with or without Jesus. 50%. So you might ask somebody, are you going to go to heaven? Oh, I hope so. I've been more good than bad. It's that simplistic sort of, yes?
So this survey was taken in the 70s, correct?
No, it's like the turn of the century.
What do you think if this survey was done again, like right now, in 2026?
Well, one of
what would it reflect?
One of the ideas is that it would probably be worse. Yes?
If you think about it, technically that's true, but name one person who hasn't sinned except for Jesus. As in, if you are truly good and you have not sinned your entire life at all, then you go to heaven, right?
Well, I mean, it's a balance thing. It's like in Islam,
I know, I'm just trying to kind of, I guess, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you can go to heaven without Jesus. I'm just saying that unless you're Jesus,
you're not going to make it.
going to heaven.
Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to say.
and that's the clear,
Said only God is good.
response, right? Exactly.
Yeah, so basically by default, yeah, never mind. I don't know.
Well, at least you didn't say Jesus.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that by works or like being good you can go to
Yeah.
heaven. I was never saying.
At least you didn't say Jesus was a polygamist. He's off on some. Nathan? Okay. 4% affirm exclusivity of Christ for salvation, which is very clear in the Bible. I'm the only way. I'm the life. I'm the way, the truth, the life. No man comes into the Father. Only 4%. Okay, some additional polling of adult Americans. 40% affirm pantheism. A lot of people believe that. They say things, have you heard people say things like, the universe was good to me today? That's a pantheistic statement. Yeah, right. 36 believe in astrology, that it's actually scientific instead of mumbo jumbo. 25% affirm reincarnation, etc. Okay, this is kind of interesting to gauge where people are on all these things. You can see how people who self-identify as non-religious, I don't want it to have anything to do with any religion, where we are in Vermont, it's 56%. That's the highest. 42% in Alaska. But look at New England. It's pretty bad. New Hampshire, 55. Washington is 45. What's that? So that's why we started our college over in New England, because it's the most godless place, including Alaska and the Northwest. But it's growing. I think that has grown.
What was the statistic taken?
Yeah, let me see if I got that. It's not that long ago, so it's pertinent, but I'm not sure. Does this have a, let's see what it is. This was 2013, so, relatively, for you, that's a long time ago, but not for me.
It was within my life.
Yeah.
Decently close, but it's, wow.
So, most and least Bible-minded cities. The most Bible-minded is in Tennessee, Alabama, Virginia, Missouri, Shreveport, and the least in Iowa, San Francisco, Boston, Albany, Schenectady, which is right where we live, there by Vermont, and then Rhode Island. So some of the least Bible-minded are where we are in the Northeast and in the West there.
Where does Alaska fall on the scale?
I don't see any cities in Alaska here. Just, I'm looking for isn't it AK?
Yeah. And the K has to be capital, otherwise not.
You know what?
Juneau just doesn't exist.
Is it on here? Are there any AKs? I don't see any.
Alaska just wasn't counted.
Yeah? Are you guys used to that, sort of being overlooked?
We're a little island by Hawaii.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, here's another one. Kind of the same thing. Tennessee, Louisiana, and then you got the Northeast. Connecticut, Maine, New York, New Hampshire. Massachusetts are the worst. Post-Christian cities, 2015. Albany, right where we are, there is in Vermont. We're in that area. Burlington, Vermont, Boston, all of those things. I don't see anything about Alaska. Sorry about that. I don't see any Alaskas.
Ooh, we made it.
So Alaska, church or synagogue attendance, Alaska looks like it's in the 30 to 34%. And of course, I show this to my students in Vermont because it's the worst, 25% or less. It's the only blue state there, Vermont.
How do you, is this people that don't know Jesus or just people
Well, it's people that don't bother with it at all, and a percentage of those don't know Jesus, don't know who he is.
Is it because they haven't been evangelized or because they have chosen actively to not?
It's because there's nobody up there to evangelize them, partly, and because their heritage is to move away from God. People that move to Vermont.
Does Utah actually get to count? I feel like
Oh,
Utah
yeah.
would probably be Mormon,
Yeah,
but it's technically a church.
right. So that's probably counted in that way with the Mormon thing. But you got,
Could you
it's,
elaborate a little bit more about the history of people moving to Vermont to get away from?
well, Vermont, it was really difficult there to farm because it's just the Green Mountains and rocks. So you had to be real sturdy, like a pioneer type. And a lot of people that moved north there were that kind of people. And in general, they were not Christians. They were not God, they were godless people. And trying to get away from society, in a sense, like a lot of people up here. There's more to it, but you can see how New Hampshire, all of New England has turned to be mostly non-church going people.
So, in evangelistic efforts, has Vermont been historically ignored, perhaps?
Yeah, a little bit. There's not that many people there, yeah. So that's one of the reasons that we planted our college there.
Is that percentage based on the population or based on just how many people are there?
Well, it's based on the population of,
What I meant was
of
like,
the
is
state.
it saying there's only 25 people going to church, but there's only 26 people in the place? Are they counting?
no, it's 25% of the whole population of, yeah. All right, it's just interesting. Now, we have some evangelists, apologists, think that reason is not a useful tool because everybody that they're going to be dealing with is a postmodern. Everything's relative. So leaders of the emerging churches espouse this idea that you got to use other ways of reaching people rather than just evidence, reasoning, and
Didn't our book just talk about how to deal with relativists?
right. But they're embracing it as the culture and saying we have to reach them in other ways. And I don't think that's it. I think Jesus and the apostles all said, look, this is the truth. How do you know? Well, Jesus rose from the dead. You're accountable because of what has been made. You can see that God's, all of the arguments they make. Since postmoderns don't have confidence in absolute truth, the evangelists should appeal to feelings. So this has been a trend. This may not be relative or something that would be useful to you now. I don't know. But they suggest that we should make the gospel become true for them through relationships and personal stories. But in the end, you have to trust that Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And you can't do it this way. If the gospel only becomes true for one, then it's not universally true for all. That's appealing to the correspondence view of truth. Christianity loses its exclusivity if the test of genuine belief is only a personal test, like the burning in the bosom. See, what we're claiming is that Jesus really is the Son of God in reality, and thus he is the truth. He proved it by raising again from the dead, all those things which are evidential and public, not just feelings. So we can't really compete on that feelings alone level because the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and everybody else also has that level, and so it just becomes chaotic. If my truth claims are true because I believe them, then every truth claim is true because someone believes them And this is the problem with relative truth. Or everything is true, nothing is true. So we have to deal with truth as in apologetics and evangelism. That's the point of this. So here's a couple things that have to do with the perspective that we're talking about of truth or just subjectivity. My perspective. The guy says over here on the left, you have to realize we live in a postmodern world. And the lady says, is that a fact? So he's making a claim that we live in this truth is relative world, and so you have to go along with it and embrace that truth is relative. And she says, is that a fact? And of course, he can't show that that's a fact. And then I love this other one. This is a very postmodern sort of subjective, everything is relative view. She says, when I look at all these stars, it's hard for me to believe that I'm really the center of the universe. But that's what a lot of people believe. It's all about their perspective. Whatever they believe is what they stand on. And then the Christian comes on and says, but what if it's false? What if it's not a fact? What if God's the center of the universe? And you might remember this one, the scientist guy. I believe in science. It's not scientific. If it's not scientifically verifiable, then it's meaningless. And of course, exposing that statement as self-refuting, the person says, can you scientifically verify that statement? So a lot of what the world believes is pretty empty, like that screen right there. See how I did that? All right, guys, that's it. What I'm going to do is we're going to take a break, and then we're not going to come back. And I'm going to give you the next hour and a half after the break to finish up, to work on your exams, okay? So that's it. Thank you.